Welcome, stormwater pollution prevention, no rain. We'll get right to it. Welcome to Cadenza Environmental. Obviously, I'd rather be playing this, but it doesn't pay that much. So anyway, we're here today to talk about stormwater pollution prevention. Don't want to drop my guitar. My goal is here to explain this to you in about 10 minutes or so. Give you the basics of what stormwater pollution prevention is all about. First of all, stormwater pollution prevention plans are required under the NPDES program at most facilities and construction sites. They're required for construction sites that disturb more than an acre of land, and also recognize that these are evergreen documents that are designed and required to be updated and modified regularly as needed. Before we get into what are all in the plans, I want to go cover a few of the basics. Some about what common stormwater pollutants there are. There's sediments and soils that get into it that can contaminate and cause problems in rivers and lakes and streams, salts, nutrients, fertilizers and detergents, even trash, bottles, plastics, paper, other kinds of materials that can get into our waterways that are that come from stormwater pollutants, and not only at facilities but all over the place. So these are some of the examples that I'm sure you've seen. The other thing I want to cover too is what best management practices are, and I'll get into a bit deeper about what this is all about. But basically, and you may have heard of best management practices before, it's simply a term that represents management and physical behaviors used to help prevent and eliminate pollutants from entering stormwater. How or why it ever came up with this term of best management practices, I don't know. But there are two different types. Just know that there are structural or non-structural BMPs and structural BMPs. Non-structural best management practices are simple things like good housekeeping practices, moving materials indoors or covered to prevent stormwater runoff, eliminating the source altogether. Also training practices and things like training employees to know what is considered stormwater pollutants, and putting practices in place to stop pollutants from being created in the first place, such as using detergents for washing down buildings or trucks or areas that could then get rained upon and wash detergent and things like that into stormwater systems. And then knowing where stormwater drains are and not using them to wash down any materials. Just some basic examples of what non-structural BMPs are. Structural BMPs, on the other hand, are actually physical barriers that are in place to help prevent stormwater pollutants from getting off site. Things like silt fencing in construction areas, drain inserts to capture anything that's going into a stormwater drain that shouldn't be going in, or trash and garbage and sometimes sediments or large materials, ponds for sedimentation, vegetative barriers, for example, that can be used to filter stormwater before it goes off site. Wetlands can also be used sometimes as stormwater retention and treating stormwater before it goes off site. Just some examples of structural BMPs. So with this, we'll get into what a plan is and what are the major elements of it. There are 6 major elements: organizing, assessing, identifying, actions, monitoring and auditing, and then a corrective action plan. So the first thing is organizing a plan and identifying the responsibilities of who has to do what when it comes to stormwater pollution prevention at your facility. The next thing is assessing your actual facility, assessing where stormwater pollution can be created and mapping that out, for example. Identifying actions to eliminate pollutants. Again, these best management practices. Putting into action the best management practices, some of the physical things that can be put in place. Monitoring the effectiveness of your BMPs through self-auditing, and then correcting and improving these best management practices and any deficiencies that are found. So organizing and creating a stormwater pollution prevention plan team. Most states and the federal regs require that you assemble a team. You actually put a name and a title of who at the facility has responsibilities and what their responsibilities are in the plan itself. So the individuals that are responsible for implementing the plan, these individuals need to be familiar with the facility. They need to be on site. They need to be trained with knowledge and skills needed. There are differing ways of obtaining that. But this has to be documented in your plan. The individuals are assigned to ensure compliance with the plan. So these people actually have the responsibility to ensure that whatever is written, that the facility is actually following through and doing what they say they will be doing in the plan. Then these individuals are required to review and audit and modify, or other people can too, review and audit and modify the plan and the best management practices as needed in real time. I'll get into a little bit more detail that in a couple of slides. So the first thing, after you kind of identify all these people that have these responsibilities, it could be only 2 or 3 people at a smaller facility. It could be a team of people, or as part of their normal operating jobs, maybe they have some responsibility once a week or something to ensure that certain practices are in place that they're doing to make sure stormwater pollutants are not getting off site. So all of that can just be in a plan. Won't go through a whole lot of detail of that, but just imagine this plan and a table of who, their title, and the kinds of things that they do. That's all part of a stormwater pollution prevention plan. Anyway, moving on to assessing. One of the things you have to do initially is assess your facility for what stormwater pollution could happen at your facility. And you would identify this in maps of the facility and drainage maps of the facility, where you're identifying storm drains and dry weather, storm drains and dry weather situations, discharge points where stormwater actually leaves your facility, and then the areas that are contributing to the drainage of those certain areas. You would map this in a stormwater map, such as pictured in the upper left-hand corner of this slide. In this identification process, you would also identify industrial activities that can contribute to stormwater pollution prevention or stormwater pollution. Things such as piles of salt or piles of gravel or sand or dirt or soil. Processing areas where you may have leaks that could come from whatever processing you may be doing. Vehicle storage or parking, or activities that happen outdoors that, if not controlled, could contribute to stormwater pollution. So in industrial stormwater exposures, you would identify all of this and put it on your map, and then document in the maps and in the plan what all of these things are. Next, you would do is identify best management practices to reduce and or eliminate any pollution that could come from these places. So first thing would be non-structural BMPs, such as good housekeeping. Explain what the facility does to prevent stormwater pollution. Spill prevention plans that are in place, like an SPCC plan, can be cited as one of the things that the facility does and commits to doing to ensure that you don't have oil, for example, going off site. Erosion control activities that may be ongoing, and what you're doing to ensure that you have policies and procedures in place to ensure erosion control. Other things where you maybe just eliminate having, say, detergents come on site because maybe there's been a history of using detergents for cleaning things, and they have caused some problems on site, so we don't even use them anymore. Or if you do, there are certain policies and practices and procedures that you have in place to ensure that none of those detergents can get to stormwater drains, for example. Structural BMPs, as I had mentioned earlier, are physical things that are put in place, like booming around drains or drain inserts, as pictured in the upper left-hand corner. These could be things that are put in stormwater drains to capture trash or debris, or if you have materials or shavings or whatever on the site, to make sure that they don't get off site. Maybe you would put some things in place to help ensure that they don't get in your stormwater drainage system. You can put up silt fencing if you have construction area or areas that are prone to erosion and cause material to pollutants to go off site. Or even tire washing systems, because you maybe have trucks that go in and out that have a lot of mud on their tires, and you want to make sure that they don't go off site with all that mud and then it gets washed down into a storm drain off site. So maybe you have some things to do to clean them, as pictured in the upper right hand corner of these pictures. So next action in your stormwater pollution prevention plan is to commit to doing all of these things that you've identified. So train individuals on responsibilities and the knowledge of stormwater pollution prevention, such as a training video like this, maybe a bit more detail, but these could serve in that capacity. What you're doing to implement the policies and procedures for good housekeeping at your facility. Those are the non-structural things. Structural is the commitment and doing of installing the physical BMPs, like booming around drains, washing tire systems, drain inserts, silt fencing, whatever it may be, but actually doing it. And if you do it, if you commit to doing it and you say you're going to do it, then make sure that you do it. Then one of the next steps is, once all of that stuff is in place, then you have to implement policies and procedures for regularly monitoring the commitments that you made in your stormwater pollution prevention plan. Like identify a monitoring team of personnel that their job is to go out and make sure that you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. Literally walking around with the plan and saying, okay, this is what we say we're going to do. Are we doing it? And reviewing the maps and the plans and the discharge points and the industrial activities to make sure that that they're doing what they're saying they're supposed to be doing. And or if you find some deficiencies, then understand what those deficiencies are, document what those deficiencies are in these inspections, and then next, doing something about it. And that's what's next, correcting and improving. So in this self-monitoring and self-auditing program, the next thing that's in the plan itself is the commitment to do something about it. So you go out and do these monitoring and inspections, and you find that maybe your training is a bit weak, or people should know that they're doing an activity, but they should know better. So obviously the training isn't sufficient to have these folks recognize that they're causing or potentially causing some stormwater pollution. Are the barriers in place, or the silt fencing that's supposed to be up because it's a erosion area, is it actually up and physically working, or is it not being maintained? So you look for those kinds of things. Are your maps in place and good in place? Are management of change procedures in place to capture new industrial activities that maybe came on site since your SWPPP was actually created? All of those kinds of things are supposed to be captured and then understood, and then go back around to the top of your action plan and make changes and alterations to your stormwater pollution prevention plan to capture any of these activities that can and should be better. That's what a stormwater pollution prevention plan is all about. It's not more complicated than that. There can be a lot more details, but that's it in a nutshell. It's not complicated, but you got to remember this. If you write it down in your plan that you say you're going to do something, make sure you do it. Because if you don't do what you say you're going to do, then arguably you may be out of compliance with your permit, because you said you're going to do something but you're not doing it. Some folks can argue then you're not compliant with your permit. Anyway, keep that in mind. Glad to do these short little training sessions. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me. Talk to you later. Thanks so much.